To discuss the significance of this Sunday's parliamentary elections in Venezuela, we now welcome Miguel Figueroa, a president of the Canadian Peace Congress. Miguel, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
Miguel, how important do you think that this Sunday's elections are for Venezuela?
Well, elections are always important, but I think it's fair to say that these elections, the December 6th elections for the National Assembly, are particularly significant. Ever since Hugo Chávez's election as president in 1999, there have been easily more than a dozen elections in the country, and of course a referenda as well on the Constitution and other vital matters and so on. So elections in Venezuela are certainly not a rarity. They're really quite common, even occurring more frequently than here in Canada. But these particular elections are crucial because they give a lie to those who are suggesting, in fact, that there is no democracy, there is no mandate from the masses of the Venezuelan people for government structures, for the presidency, for the National Assembly, and so on. And especially given the events of the past, 18 or 24 months, including the coup attempt, the really a vicious escalation of sanctions, economic sanctions, trying to asphyxiate the Venezuelan economy and bringing great harm to the people, particularly at a time of a pandemic. These elections, I think, are really quite unique and special. And of course, the polls have just closed, so we don't know, of course, what the preliminary results are. They will be coming in, no doubt, very, very soon. But the very fact that these elections are taking place in these conditions is an affirmation, in fact, that Venezuela is a secure home for the democratic rights of people, and I think, despite the efforts of the abstentionist elements, the most extreme pro-imperialist elements in the opposition, Juan Guaido and his ilk, to cast doubt and to make accusations of fraud and so on. These are very transparent attempts, in fact, to try to belittle Venezuela's exercise of democracy, and I don't think that they're going to wash with a lot of people. Unfortunately, the Canadian government will no doubt be amongst those who will join in this reactionary chorus. But the Canadian government doesn't speak for all of the Canadian people, and there are millions of Canadians who oppose Canada's involvement in the Lima Group, oppose the sanctions that have been imposed on Venezuela, and want to restore not only diplomatic relations with the reopening of embassies and so on, but also relations of trade, of cultural exchanges, all-sided relations, good neighborly relations between Canada and Venezuela.
Miguel, what kind of coverage have these elections received in Canada?
Well, for the most part, of course, they're being ignored. This is all part of the attempt to downplay their importance, and there will then, of course, be a short barrage of articles saying, well, elections took place, but they're meaningless because they were fraudulent. But essentially, they're trying to downplay the significance of these elections so that they can keep up this myth, this lie, that in fact there is no representative government, there's no legitimate government in the country, and that Juan Guaido and his representatives, including his so-called ambassador to Canada, constitute the real voice of Venezuela. So Yeah, there hasn't been very much in the mainstream media, but that's quite typical. Whenever there's elections in targeted countries, that the outcome of which is not going to be in the interests of imperialism, they downplay them, they ignore them, and there's really kind of a wall of silence around these elections.
Miguel, the Venezuelan opposition has become more divided. We've seen part of the opposition that is participating in this Sunday's elections, but another more extremist part, as you mentioned, Juan Guaido and the like, who have called for a boycott and for abstentionism. What do you think could be the change in terms of Canadian government policy towards Venezuela if the opposition, the part of the opposition that does want to participate in the democracy, wins a majority in the National Assembly? Do you think that could change the Canadian government's policy?
Well, I think the bottom line is that the Trudeau government's primary objective with respect to Venezuela is to see the end of the Bolivarian revolutionary project, and however they can bring that about, they're prepared to do it. If that includes the tightening of sanctions and more efforts to strangle the Venezuelan economy, they will do that. If they think that somehow this can come about by other means, they will support that. But their bottom line is they want to provide a venue, a means for Canadian capital, for Canadian mining companies in particular, in the extractive industries, to get into the Venezuelan countryside, into the Venezuelan economy, so that they can more effectively plunder those resources. That's their bottom line, and they are not likely to be satisfied until they achieve those objectives. But on the other hand, of course, as I said earlier, there's a lot of Canadians, increasing number within the labor movement, within people's movements, obviously within the anti-imperialist movement itself, within the Latino community, which is not insignificant across the country, who have come to different conclusions. They want to see a restoration of proper relations. They would want to see an end to this kind of hybrid warfare that Canada, to its shame, has been engaged in, at the urging of Washington. And the government, in many respects, cannot completely ignore the fact that there is a significant constituency in this country that disagrees with their hostile attitudes towards Venezuela and its people.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for offering your valuable insight into this Sunday's parliamentary elections in Venezuela and the view from there in Canada. Thank you.